I am honored now to introduce our Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah! Woo!
Guys, thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Oh, shucks. Thank you, guys. Thank you all so much. Let's hear it again for our veterans, our nurses, our leaders, our advocates, our organizers, and just the plain old folks who show up and give a damn, because that is what this moment asks of each and every one of us. So again, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. And, you know, there are some things that we're hearing today, and there's some themes that we've got coming out. And especially when it comes to the VA, all I can think of is that classic refrain that my parents always told me growing up, which is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, exactly, there you go, don't fix it. And that is the entire opening and approach that we have seen when it comes to privatization, is the idea that this thing that isn't broken, this thing that provides some of the highest quality care to our veterans somehow needs to be fixed, optimized, tinkered with until we don't even recognize it anymore. And here's the thing, they are trying to fix it. But who are they trying to fix it for is the question we gotta ask. And this is who they're trying to fix it for. They're trying to fix the VA for pharmaceutical companies. They're trying to fix the VA for insurance corporations. And ultimately, they're trying to fix the VA for a for-profit healthcare industry that does not put people or veterans first. And so we have a responsibility to protect it. Because if it is any community that deserves Cadillac, first-class healthcare in the United States of America, it is our military service members and veterans. Period. People talk about the advocacy that comes from our district and the advocacy that comes from me as though it's this big, radical, scary, crazy thing. And you know why they say it's so radical and so crazy? You know, it's this big, radical belief at the core of what we advocate for is because we believe that some things should not be for sale in this country. Because in 2019, in an era where we think that we have insulin for sale and we try to skim off the profits of life-saving medications, it is radical to believe that caring for our veterans should not be for sale in America, that insulin should not be a for-profit gamble in America, that the ability to go to your doctor should not be dependent on your income, but on how sick you are and how badly you need that care. And so when we talk about the VA, we need to talk about protecting the VA. And if we really want to fix the VA so badly, let's start hiring and filling up some of those 49,000 vacancies that haven't been hired. Just before coming out here, I had the privilege and honor of sitting down with some of our incredible nurses out here. And let's hear it again for our nurses. We heard an amazing statistic earlier, which is that one-third of the nurses in the VA have served themselves. There is no replacement for that. There is no substitute for walking into a place where people just get it. Because you walk in to a VA and your medical providers automatically know that because you have served, and when you tell them where you have served or how you have served, they automatically are generating a picture in their mind of those little things to look out for that do not exist in the normal population, that do not exist anywhere else. That is valuable. That is invaluable. That is something that does not get measured in a balance sheet when people are talking about cost efficiencies. And that is why we have to protect our VA, because the things that make our care sometimes most powerful, whether it is our health care, whether it is our ability to get an education, whether it is our space, it is community, and it is giving a damn. And you can't put a price tag on that. But at the same time, it makes the world of a difference between whether you get screened for a certain specific disease or not. And when it comes to our congressional action, I'll give you a quick example. One is that one of the two committees I serve on in Congress is the Oversight Committee. That's where we're giving Michael Cohen a hard time. And I serve on two subcommittees. I'm the vice chair of the subcommittee for civil rights on Oversight Committee, and I also serve on the environmental subcommittee. The very first hearing we had in the environmental subcommittee was about a chemical known as PFAS. PFAS is a very specific chemical that exists in fire extinguisher foam. And what we saw was that in communities surrounding PFAS and with employees and people who are directly impacted by certain PFAS chemicals, we're seeing certain health indicators, damages to fertility rates, issues with cancer levels. And what we saw was that the people who are most impacted by this are folks who served on military bases. Now this is domestically, and it's abroad. So we have an entire unique set of indicators. And when people want to talk about rare disease, rare disease may be rare, but it's not random. And when we have a concentrated population, and when that population is brought into the VA, that means we can take better care. That means that we can screen for preventative measures, and we can prevent an increased risk from turning into increased disease. And so that is what our VA is all about. That's what we're here to protect. Lastly, and this is something that I also think is very important, is that when we talk about the Mission Act and we talk about other efforts in Congress, is that people are trying to decouple our health care for our veterans from military spending. And we can't let them do that. Because what they're trying to do is authorize increases to our budgets for the military, but then take out the spending that we need most for our service members and veterans. And we can't let that happen. One of the fights that I was just having, or we were just giving our own party a hard time about, was that there was a negotiation to make sure that that military budget was higher than discretionary spending, but they want to move veterans' health care into discretionary spending. No, hell no is right. So we said, And now they're going back to the drawing board. These little fights are small. They may not be covered on CNN or in the front or on the front page, but they mean the difference between waiting a month, waiting 2 days, waiting a year, or not getting care at all. And so these little fights, they seem little in the details, but they make a world of a difference. And so I just wanted to commend you all, because, you know, politicians don't always have a reputation for being a moral paragon, right? But you know who won't be questioned? Nurses, veterans, teachers. You all are the front line. And so when you walk in, they can say no to me, but they can't say no to you. And so I appreciate you all for showing up and doing the work. And acknowledging that, and it's so important, and I want to leave you all with this, is never forget how much power you all have. Always. Always. You all have the most power in this room, and I want to acknowledge again that what we're seeing today is something that is incredible, which is that our power only builds when we unite our fights. When nurses see their destinies tied up with veterans, when veterans see their destinies tied up with nurses. We've got some nurses over here that came all the way from Baltimore. All the way from Baltimore, if you guys want to be recognized. They're trying to organize their workplace right now, and that is what this is all about. Because when we try to split up our fights and we don't show up for each other, then none of us get ahead. And so when we come together and we show up for each other, we can get everything that we want, and we don't have to wait for it. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And now, for the town's questions and comments, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Wanda Mayo Robinson. She's the Associate Director for National Nurses United Bronx Local.
Good evening, town. How are you? As Novaton said, As Novaton said, I'm the Associate Director of the NNU in the Bronx, and I'll be moderating the town portion of the town hall. We will take questions or comments from our community and address them to our speakers. So, okay, the first question is from Josie Martinez-Terry. And the second question is from Cindy Lamonaco.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The question is, how would Medicare for all impact veterans' care at the VA?
So I think this is a really critical question, because like with so many other policies, people try to spread a lot of disinformation. And one of the first things people say is that Medicare for all is going to take away VA care or complicate VA care. And one of the things that we're talking about first and foremost is that Medicare for all seeks to primarily focus on folks that are outside of the VA eligibility system and make sure that we're expanding a public single-payer option to all people. There's a question about what we may want to do and how we may want to interface with the VA on that in terms of the policy, but it doesn't, there's nothing codified to take out or wipe out the VA or anything like that. It's about how we want to work with the veterans community and the VA community to learn from the administration and figure it out. I mean, if you ask me, I would like VA for all. Which is in some ways a step further. But hey, we'll take what we can get, right? I don't know if anyone else here wants to.
I think one of the great things about Medicare for All is that it would make all veterans eligible for the VA, because as you know, of the 20 million veterans now, only 9 million or maybe they're not all eligible. And so you wouldn't have the problem of other than honorable discharges. You wouldn't have the problem of you're too rich or you're too healthy. You could all go to the VA if you chose so to expand choices.
John?
Yeah, the other thing is right now the VA cannot collect any funds from the Medicare eligibles. So even though I'm an eligible Medicare person, the VA can't backcharge Medicare for any of the services I get through the VA. They've segregated those funds into two distinct systems.
Cindy Lamonaco is a colleague of mine. She seems to have left, but I'll speak on her behalf.
Okay.
And her question is, why not offer VA medical insurance that our veterans could go to any doctor that they want? A VA facility might not be practical and sometimes inconvenient.
So the idea, and I think John talked about this, is that the idea is that private sector healthcare is there for veterans. I mean, there aren't people to take care of veterans in rural areas. 55% of American counties have no psychologist, psychiatrist, or social worker. Over 80% of psychiatrists in New York City don't take any health insurance at all. We have we're short 45,000 primary care physicians in America. In San Francisco, where I come from, most practices, primary care practices, are closed. I had to go to a friend of mine who's a doc in one hospital to get a doc. Actually, I had to go to a VA ER doc to get him to talk to a doc in a private sector practice who's his doc to get into his practice. I mean, this is just a total myth that there is capacity in the private sector to take care of veterans. It's a total myth. And veterans are going to be, there are some places where it will work, but in mental health and primary care, et cetera, it ain't going to work. And as I said, these doctors don't know about veteran-specific issues.
Yeah, the other problem is they don't take VA money, and just like they don't take Medicare money. There's a lot of dead spots in the United States that have a real problem with people with Medicare, that the doctors don't take their money. They won't take it.
Hi, as the mom of a veteran who served for 8 years in the 82nd Airborne Intel for the 7th Special Forces Group, 7th Special Forces Group Soldier of the Year in 2009 because I have to, and served 26 months in Kandahar, Afghanistan over 2 deployments, came home with PTSD, continued to serve, went to school on the Green to Gold program, and then left the service and waited 16 months for treatment of his PTSD and addiction, and eventually died because of it 2 weeks before he was finally scheduled to go into treatment. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the gap between DOD and VA when it comes particularly to those that they know are leaving the service with a service-connected disability. And I'd like to share, this is my card, it's also my son. I've got 8 copies of it, one for everybody at that table, even though a couple of you already have it. I'd like to share this with you so that you can reach out to me and maybe we can work together to fix where it's disconnected, because Dan loved the VA. He only wanted his treatment from the VA. He waited 6.5 hours on hold the last time he called them because he was sick and thought he had the flu when he had an addiction-related infection that wound up killing him. 6.5 hours. It didn't have to happen that way, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are on how we kind of fill in that gap.
Yeah, there's a real problem a lot of times with the crossover between DOD and the VA. The VA's not ready. A lot of people don't like to leave the DOD because they're getting serviced in the DOD, and so they rather stay there. This is particularly true, by the way, for prosthetic devices. If you're in the military, you can get a $50,000 new leg, and they'll give you a couple. You go to the VA, you're going to get one if you're lucky. Unfortunately, the PTSD programs, that's an issue because there really just aren't enough people in the system that can help with PTSD, and that's the real problem. So unless the real issue is getting more staff, and again, more psychiatrists, more programs to deal with the folks that we've got coming back. PTSD is a big, big problem, and it doesn't go away. And there's some issues, by the way, right now with changes that the VA is trying to do with this 12-week care. We'll give you 12-week care, then go away. I know that I have friends of mine who've been going to the vet center program every week religiously for the last 30-some-odd years. And when they threatened to close it, they went crazy because, frankly, they would have killed themselves. And so it is an issue that we also have to stay on top of. There just aren't enough practitioners in the system.
And I think that one of the things that veterans have told me is that the DOD, when they're in the DOD, when they are under the responsibility of the DOD, they aren't given enough information about the VA. They aren't told that they need to have a paper trail. And really, they are discouraged from going to the medic, from going to the doctor. You're a wuss. You're a sick call ranger. And I think that one of the things that has disturbed me the most, particularly in the discussion of suicide prevention, is that why are they blaming the VA for problems that started with these wars in the DOD, with these multiple deployments, with people whose brains are... And, one of the things that you're going to see with the Mission Act is more blaming the VA rather than blaming Congress or blaming the Kochs because the VA is going to be held responsible for coordinating private sector care with private sector physicians who will not coordinate with each other in the private sector, and there's no requirement that they have to coordinate with the VA. And one of the messages I want to leave you with is if this disaster happens, do not blame the VA.
I just want to add one other thing on this suicide issue. You hear the number 20, 21, 22 people a day. And there's kind of an assumption it's all the new veterans. 60% of them are over the age of 50. It's not the new veterans. It's my generation of veterans. And it's because they're coming out of the closet after 40 or 50 years. See, some people came home and got high, some people came home and got drunk, some people came home and worked themselves to death. And when they stop working and retire, all the stuff they hid in the closet comes back to haunt them. The VA even has an acronym for it. It's, what is it? LOSS, Late Onset Stress Syndrome. I mean, they give it a name, but they don't give them treatment. The other thing is, you hear about these people blowing their brains out in the VA waiting room and all the rest of this stuff, and everybody's blaming that on lack of care in the VA hospital system. We don't think they do enough of a social autopsy on these folks. Because it's our belief, frankly, that a substantial portion of those veterans who get to that point, it's because of the VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration, which is stringing them out forever to get the benefits they're entitled to and the compensation they need to get the treatment that they deserve, that is causing all this aggravation and causing all these problems, never mind financial, at the same time. And that's why they're killing themselves.
The topic that we're going on right now is a very strong topic that you should be able to watch your veterans and how they act and the moves that they get. And a lot of people also think that, if it happens to you one time, you're cured. Well, my name is Johnny H. Williams Jr. I had 5 attempts already, and in my new book, it's called Suicide, Stop It Now. This book is telling you a lot of reasons why not only veterans, but suicides are done in civilian life also. You keep thinking that it only happens one time. You're wrong. Without the psychiatrists and the systems that we have in the VA Medical Center, why would I go out there for someone that I don't know, and I've been having this problem for years, and you're going to give me a new person, and I don't even trust that person. When a person is going through suicide, it is no joke. My only reason for being here now is because he told me, you are not going anywhere. You got a job to do. This is no joke. And when the book comes out, you're going to read some of the things that you will not even believe. Or look in the room at all these veterans. They haven't told half of you the stuff that they've been going through. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to thank you for standing up and telling your story and telling your son's story. It takes so much courage to do that and strength to do that. And thank you for sharing that, because it crystallizes. It's only when we hear it straight from a mother, straight from a person directly impacted, that it's really crystallized and put right in front of us how urgent this issue is. As Suzanne and many others have indicated, that a lot of this has to do with systemic issues. We heard about the actual amount of providers that we have. The fact that we do not have enough mental health care practitioners. We don't have a lot of medical practitioners or enough medical practitioners at all. And that's where we really start to see the impact of other policy proposals that maybe don't sound like they directly impact the VA, like tuition-free public colleges and universities so that we can educate a populace that produces the doctors that serve in the VA. Because when medical school, I know that when I first got into college, I was a pre-medical student. One of the main reasons a huge reason why I transitioned out was because I knew that I wouldn't be able to afford medical school. And so that is happening systemically across the country. So that's one big aspect of it. The other is that we need to fully fund our systems and actually hire on these vacancies, because we are finding nurses, we are finding doctors, but then they have to wait 5 months to hear back if they have a job. And so then they go and they take another offer. So that's another huge issue of it. And the third, as was also indicated, is that it's cultural, and it goes all the way back to when you are in service. This idea of what is tough and what is weak in terms of finding care and not finding care. The idea that advocating for yourself is somehow victimhood or helplessness when you are actually being courageous and brave enough to be your own champion. And so a lot of it has to do with the cultural change that needs to be made. And also, there are some other issues that I always raise. I've been having some of these conversations with vets in my office, and this even goes back to the question of discharge. Because when people start getting dishonorable discharges, sometimes that has to do with a mental health issue. Sometimes that has to do with PTSD that you are generating on the job. Then you get a dishonorable discharge, and then you don't have access to the mental health care that you need in order to turn the ship around. And so it goes all the way back from your culture in the service to how we are educating our populace, to the actual individual policy mechanisms, and to how we're fully funding and giving people the resources that they need.
I'll just quickly add, I know at the end of this entire town hall we're going to be talking about a call to action for things, but on this issue specifically, there's some calls to action that you can take right now. There's legislation that's already been passed. There's also legislation that's in the hopper right now, and there's a recent presidential executive order that was just talked about, all that addresses these things, but they're not moving fast enough. The Clay Hunt Save Act, we worked with a lot of veteran organizations to pass back in 2016. It was named after a Marine veteran who died by suicide. It has not been fully implemented, so we're pushing the VA and the administration to make sure that it is fully implemented, because some of the things that are in there will address the issues that we're talking about today. The Commander John Scott Hannon bill is in the Senate right now. It's going to build on the Clay Hunt Save Act to further implement some of these things and to increase their potency. Also named after a service member, in this case a Navy SEAL, who served 26 years, I believe, retired, and died by suicide. All of these things, both of these bills can make a huge impact on these. The President's executive order has a lot of good things in it, but it also has a 1-year time span to form a task force to look at these issues and to come up with recommendations. We don't need a year to take these actions. We know what needs to be done right now. So I encourage you to get in touch with your members of Congress, get in touch with the White House, tell them to implement these actions today. Don't wait on the executive order. Make these issues happen today, because we can begin fixing these and get the 20 number down.
I'm sorry, but we have no time left for, this was our last question, so I will introduce my NNU sister. Oh, my mic, I'm sorry. I'd like to introduce my union sister, Captain Frances Capione of the Army and Registered Nurse.
Good evening.
My name is
Francisca Capellan. I joined the military 40 years ago as a private. At the present time, I am a captain in the United States Army Reserves. As part of my military career, I trained as a combat medic. Shortly after, I became a nurse, and I have been one ever since. I have worked half of that time at the VA as a VA nurse. If I get sick, do not take me to the VA. One night, I got very sick to the point that I got unconscious, unresponsive. Guess what? My kid decided to take me to the VA because that was the closest hospital to my house. To my surprise, What I encountered at the VA, it was not what I expected. It was an eye-opener. I felt that the nurse that was taking care of me that night showed a lot of compassion, showed a lot of care. All the staff at the ER were showing the same kind of sentiments. Up to this day, I consider that nurse part of my family. Now, I work as the VA in home-based care, primary care. We are the nurses that goes to visit the veteran at the home. And every time we go there, we try to treat those veterans with the same kind of respect and compassion that I felt that night. I feel that I'm coming to see my family. Sometimes when we call and we schedule an appointment with those veterans, they be waiting for us at the door or they be waiting for outside. That's because they know that we're not only the nurse, we also somebody that's going to listen to this veteran. I hope that after what you heard tonight, you understand that the VA is the best care for the veteran. I hope also that our politicians and elected officials fully fund, fix, and staff the VA. Plus, will protect our VA from those who care more about profits and about money than what they care for me or my fellow veterans. Tonight we see our nation at its best. Public school system welcomed the town hall. The police department opened it. Our great union, the NAU, organized it. Our Vietnam veterans shared their wisdom. The post 9/11 veterans gave us confidence that they will no longer lose ground for the VA health care on their watch. And also our faith communities is also here with us. This is America at its best. I am proud to add my boys, my Army boys, my nurse boys to the exercise of democracy. Remember, a robust democracy calls for all of us to participate in it. So, on that note, I would like to introduce the NAU, Miss Atlantic Director and Veteran Corey Lanham. Thank you.
All right, as Francis just said, my name is Corey Lanham. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Collective Bargaining Director and the VA Director for National Nurses United, the largest nurses union in the country. We represent 23 VA hospitals across the country and 11,000 registered nurses who work for veterans. I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I think they did an amazing job, and I'd like all of us to offer them another round of applause, please. So I hope you all found this town hall informative, and I hope we recognize the attacks that the VA is under, the VA faces. As far as I'm concerned, as a veteran and a son of veterans, VA healthcare is a contract for veterans. And the contract says that we will be provided with healthcare, veterans will be provided with healthcare for as long as they live. It is unconscionable to me that they are trying to privatize this system, and we cannot allow them to privatize this system. I also represent registered nurses who bargain contracts, and the way we push back in a contract fight, which I think this is, a contract fight, is we educate, agitate, and we organize to build power to push back against what's going on. Thank you. I think veterans, nurses, and other workers in the VA system have to do the same thing. We have to come together. We have to educate each other on what's going on. A lot of this stuff, the Mission Act, for example, is happening in the dark. We have to be on top of it. We have to educate ourselves. We have to educate our co-workers, our fellow veterans, and then we have to agitate and get in the street. One of the major things I think we have to do going forward is literally to organize our communities just like we're doing here tonight. So, the call to action that we're asking folks to do, nurses will be organizing these town halls all over the country where we represent members. We're asking you locally to organize other town halls in other parts of New York to educate New Yorkers on what is going on in the VA. Is that something we can do? All right. We also will be introducing legislation to fix the Mission Act. All of the things, we don't, I think, to your question, Chris, I think it was, we don't have an issue with veterans going to the private sector to get care where that is necessary. What we do have an issue with is the private sector not being held to the same accountability as the VA, the private sector not providing the same level of care as the VA, and veterans being pushed into a system where they'll get less for a lot more. That's what we have a problem with. So, we have legislation that we will introduce soon to fix the issues we have with the Mission Act, and we'd like all of you guys to help move that legislation through Congress. I will just ask you this, though. Do you think that we will get legislation like that passed in this Congress? I think the only way we move this legislation is nurses and veterans and communities joining together to push back against these legislators and against and with AOC, not just against. I think that's the only way we get it. So we have to, in our communities, build and organize for us to be able to move this forward. Thank you all for your service. Thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate it. Please organize, 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 and we can push back against this privatization. Thank you.
Oh, that's true. Guys, we should join this.
I told you I was coming. I wanted to get Wanda. Johnny is Donna from Popular Bank. I saw you in the next way. Like I was in the I'm sorry.